Pakistan Army Chief General Qamar Bajwa backed Prime Minister Imran Khan's peace overture and suggested that India and Pakistan bury the past, three questions arose immediately. Number one, why this sudden about turn? Secondly, is it feasible for the two neighbors to coexist in peace? And thirdly, what sort of impact such a development will have on the regional geopolitics? Let us have a look. Reasons for the latest overture. What could the reasons be? Well, until the other day, Pakistan and India were at each other's throats, both literally on the war front or rather on the border during the border skirmishes and in the international forums. Infiltration into India from the Pakistan side remained unabated for a very, very long time, till recently. Exchange of artillery fire had become a daily affair. In fact, people living on the border areas of both sides were suffering hugely because of this. And just when one thought that this had become the new normal at the LOC, suddenly we learned of the ceasefire between the two neighbors. It happened just a few days back, or rather couple of weeks back. Now, the two sides appeared inclined towards maintaining peace on the borders. Apparently, this was not voluntary. They could not have done it on their own. Some other factors played their role. It could not be that suddenly the wisdom had dawned on these two belligerent neighbors. So what could the reason be for this development? Well, let us look at the geopolitical scenario first. China's rise as a military and economic superpower has upset the emerging global geopolitical order after the Soviet Union's disintegration. It appeared that the USA would be the sole big brother of a unipolar world. However, the dawn of 21st century witnessed the awakening of the sleeping dragon. From being a struggling third world economy for most of the 20th century, up till most of the 20th century, China transformed into an economic and military superpower as if by magic. In quick but well thought out moves, China spread its influence in Asia and Africa through military pacts and economic cooperation. China targeted the ASEAN and SAARC countries to emerge as a powerful neo-colonist. There is no other word for it. China may talk about friendship, cooperation, etc. But if you look at the end result of its pacts with various countries, it is as good as a new hegemon and a neo-colonist. Just when it appeared that Trump's America is all set to curl into a shell and leave the Chinese to rule the roost, whatever Trump was talking, the big talk, the aggressive talk, but on the ground, he was withdrawing his forces, he was withdrawing his military assets, America's military assets back to the country. He just had made it a policy not to be the global policeman. Well, just when he was doing this, Joe Biden became the US president. And first thing that Biden did was he reversed the Trumpian foreign policy and restored to America its traditional role as the supreme hegemon. America is certainly not just a benign neighbor, though it's far, far more benign than Soviet Union or China, but it has got its own, well, neo-colonialist features. Now Americans are aggressively pushing back the Chinese expansionism in the Asia-Pacific region while ensuring that the AFPAC region, that is Afghanistan, Pakistan and the surrounding areas, these areas remain in the US camp. This is the reason why Americans are backing India to play a bigger role in South Asia as well as in the Asia Pacific region. Indians have been for the first time included in the Afghan peace talks despite opposition from Russia and China. Similarly, with active encouragement from the USA, the Quad is being turned into an economic and military compact, you can call it, outfit you can call it, or alliance you can call it. Though alliance will be a bit, it is not yet formally an alliance. And its main purpose is to contain China's aggressive moves vis-a-vis Taiwan, Australia and Southeast Asia. Moreover, with India's strong pushback against Chinese aggression on the LAC, Pakistanis have apparently realized that their all-weather friend cannot look after their interests vis-a-vis India for all time to come. There are certain ground realities which became quite stark during the recent confrontation between the two giant neighbors. The belief has been, and this belief that China cannot always, although the Chinese aggression has been interpreted as an act of solidarity with Pakistan to let India know that unlike during Bangladesh war, this time China would step in. If there is a conflict between India and Pakistan, then China will certainly step in on the side of Pakistan. And this belief has been reinforced by the fact that the Chinese are revising their strategy by refocusing on trade ties with India and placing border disputes on the back burner once again. Chinese have made the point that they are with Pakistan, but they are wise enough, clever enough not to sacrifice their own vital interests, especially trade. India is a huge market for them, and Chinese would be loath to forfeit that market. The dragon seems to have realized that India is no pushover when it comes to military confrontations. It seems that there are players interested in bringing India and Pakistan together. Americans are keen on this because they want the subcontinent to act as a bulwark against the Chinese expansion. It will remind us of the time when the Soviet Union was the major threat to American interests in Asia, and they had used Pakistan as a frontline state against communism. One sees the United Arab Emirates move to broker peace between India and Pakistan in this light, and we all know that the UAE is firmly in the US camp. The recent visit of US Defense Secretary Lloyd J. Austin to India might also have been used for this purpose. Of course, his visit had a broader agenda. Well, then there are other reasons why India and Pakistan need to be friends again. And one of those factors is Pakistan's worrisome economic health. According to the World Economic Forum, the youth unemployment in Pakistan stands at 8.5%. And in Pakistan, 64% of the population is below the age of 30. You can just imagine the seriousness of this problem. The overall unemployment is touching 15%. Inflation rate too has hit over 16%. And the prices of food and other essentials is going out of control. They are going out of control. Pakistan's per capita income has taken a huge hit. The rampaging inflation and spiraling unemployment must be pushing Pakistan to rethink its confrontation policy towards India. Add to the above the fact that Pakistan's public debt, which includes both domestic and external components, was more than rupees 36.3 trillion in the last financial year, that is 2019-2020. Worse, the United Arab Emirates have demanded that their loan of $1 billion be returned. This is going to be problematic for Pakistan. With Saudi Arabia too refusing to remain as generous as before, Pakistan's traditional funding sources in West Asia are apparently drying up. So, for now, China is the only one left, and it's not exactly a generous elder brother. In fact, China, despite its protestations of being all-weather friend, it has put even Shylock to shame. The manner in which it extracts much more than its pound of flesh. Not only Pakistan has been treated like this, even other so-called friendly countries like Sri Lanka, for example, they are facing the brunt of Chinese benignness or generosity. With pretenses trickling in from the World Bank, IMF, etc., and the Financial Action Task Force's sword hanging over its head, Pakistan's misery has hit through the ceiling, or rather, it has touched the nadir, or you can even say it has overflowed, whichever way. But Pakistan is in deep trouble financially or economically right now. Then there is historical baggage carried by both the countries, India and Pakistan. Is the path to permanent peace between India and Pakistan going to be smooth? Let us not forget that this is not the first time that Pakistan's most powerful political institution, the military establishment, has made such suggestions. At least two previous such overtures come readily to mind because they turned out to be deceptive. General Ziaul Haq had been making friendly overtures to India while harboring, training and funding Khalistani terrorist movement in India during the 1980s. Secondly, while Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Pak PM Nawaz Sharif were taking some serious steps towards peace and cooperation, General Musharraf decided to attack Kargil, and that was interpreted as a stab in the back by India. The historical baggage has other ingredients too. The Pakistani establishment has institutionalized hate India psyche as the only means of its survival. No matter what the doves may say on both sides, it will not be possible for any Pakistani ruler to do a complete about turn and start singing Hindi Paki Bhai Bhai hymns. In fact, I'm borrowing it from that Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai, and we know how it ended. The hatred for India is too widespread and too too deep to be cleansed in one go. It will take a united, cohesive, and sustained effort by all the Pakistani stakeholders to bring about the desired change. Realistically speaking, even if they make genuine attempts in this direction, the results will take several years, if not decades, to manifest. And obviously, this seems unlikely. Given the hold that bigots have on popular sentiment over there. According to an estimate, there are at least 50 Islamist outfits operating in Pakistan. Some of these are operating across the borders with India and Afghanistan. For example, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, Hizbul Mujahideen, Harkatul Ansar, or also known as Harkatul Mujahideen, Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, and Al-Badr, etc. And these are the more prominent ones. There are many others. And there are hardly any signs of Pakistan dismantling this terror infrastructure. And either it is unwilling or it is unable to do it. And we must also realize that whatever General Bajwa may say, it may or may not be ratified or supported by the other important members of the military establishment. We do not know whether they are on the same page as General Bajwa. And then we should not forget that the middle level officers over there, of the ranks of colonels and brigadiers and majors, these are the people who are highly indoctrinated, and this particular segment cannot be ignored. This particular scenario of hatred and all that, it becomes more complex with the rise of Hindutva in India since 2014. It is not only non-state actors but also several central and state government ministers who have spread, or rather who have been spreading venom against Pakistan while equating Indian Muslims with traitors and fifth columnists. It's very sad and it's a very dangerous thing to do. The sentiment against Muslims in general and Pakistan in particular has turned so hostile, so deeply hostile in certain parts of India that one wonders how will the Modi government roll it back to create a political and social atmosphere which would be conducive to facilitating India-Pakistan friendship. It is true that Prime Minister Modi has made some positive gestures recently, like wishing Prime Minister Imran Khan quick recovery from COVID-19, or wishing the people of Pakistan, greeting the people of Pakistan on their National Day on 23rd March. But such courtesies are certainly not substantial enough. They are just that, courtesies, sans policy content. Some will say, no, these are indicators of a change in policy, but I have my own doubts. Much more needs to be done by both the countries for peace to become a permanent reality. And now we must know why Indo-Pak peace is essential. It is essential for both the countries and not just for the region as such, South Asian region particularly, and Asia in general. And for this, economic reasons are a big factor. Neither India nor Pakistan can afford to remain in the present state of permanent hostility, with the respective militaries ever ready for war. The economic costs are simply too high. Pakistan's policy of low-intensive warfare is proving costly to them in terms of men, money, and social degradation. Only if you look closely at Pakistan, you will realize how much harm it has done to Pakistan society and their institutions. India too has to maintain huge military presence on its borders to keep the infiltrators at bay and maintain peace within its borders, something that is socially, militarily, and economically unhealthy. It will be stupid to keep nurturing past humiliations, real or imaginary, by both sides, because it will be at the cost of a far better future for all. Peace will certainly bring huge dividends to the two countries. Trade will boom, investments in industries, infrastructure, healthcare, education, and many other fields can usher in an unprecedented prosperity to the people of both countries. Now, apart from the economic reasons, there are strategic reasons too. And we are living in a world where you cannot ignore such factors. For India, it is essential to avoid two-front military conflict. We may be strong enough to defend our territory, but the cost would certainly be prohibitive. It would be wiser to neutralize such possibilities. It may not wean away Pakistan from China, but it would certainly encourage Pakistan to avoid becoming the Chinese cat's paw in South Asia. In addition, India and Pakistan have among the best trained militaries in the world. Their synergies can help bring peace and stability to not just South Asia but also to the Indian Ocean and Asia Pacific regions. This will also keep hegemons in check. Right now, China is having a free run of Asia and many parts of Africa, which is bound to hurt the interests of other nations, including India and Pakistan, in the long run. If India and Pakistan join hands, they have an immense potential for rebalancing power equations in West Asia, Africa, and Southeast Asia, which will be to the benefit of all. This may appear unlikely right now, but let us not forget that there are no permanent enemies, or for that matter friends, in politics, and this politics includes international version too. Things can change radically. Whoever thought that the arch rivals, arch enemies, once bitter enemies like France and Germany, or for that matter Japan and America, will become such staunch allies as they have become now. So how to bring about this peace? No, we can always talk about peace, but then there are nitty-gritties, there are certain steps to be taken, firm steps to be taken, and for that we have to look at, analyze the facts, the reasons, and then come up with a solution. Personally, I am firmly of the opinion that internal politics has a vital influence on a country's foreign policy. Therefore, before launching into the Hindi Paki Bhai Bhai anthem, there is a need for taking firm steps towards building mutual trust. The two countries must focus on cleansing their internal politics of hate towards minorities and stop equating them with traitors and fifth columnists. They are also doing it, we are also doing it. This has been happening both in Pakistan and India. minorities in India and Pakistan must have the same status and rights as their compatriots. The two countries must realize that the time for cosmetics has run out. This is clear from the BJP's tactical silence on Bangladeshis, Muslims, and Ghuspatias in the current Bengal election campaigns. You can all see that suddenly all that Kabristan and Shamshan and all that nonsense which was being talked earlier, it has gone. Nobody is talking about it now. And although Modi ji has still not started singing love songs for Muslims, but he is keeping quiet about it, and he is making some very, very meaningful, friendly gestures to Bangladesh. And this is something he must take note of. Now, while Joe Biden is reversing Trump's several policies, it will not be possible to get away with creating a false international image of being liberal, democratic, secular, and progressive, etc., etc. So these, by just mouthing such platitudes, a country cannot become all this. They have to have a solid, honest, transparent setup. Pakistan too will have to watch its steps in domestic politics. Both the countries need to bring about genuinely seismic transformation in their domestic politics. The 18th century mindset must give way to more liberal, secular, and progressive mindset, which will be more in consonance with the 21st century. Politics of hate must be replaced with politics of development. In India as well as Pakistan, there is an urgent need for healthy, positive, and vibrant institutions in various fields, be it jurisprudence, economics, education, or for that matter, any other field. This will greatly help in removing mutual distrust and acrimony and lay a foundation for durable peace and prosperity in the region. It is possible. But then the intentions should be honest and genuine. So, will the rulers of the two countries realize this? The importance of all that changes which are needed to be brought about? Well, let us wait and watch. Thanks for being with me. I'll come back with another episode soon. Bye till then.